The early morning air was still heavy with Kentucky mist when Chris Combs sat quietly in his truck, hands clasped on the steering wheel, staring at the hospital entrance. The lights flickered faintly in the distance, and though the world was waking up, for Chris everything felt frozen. His heart beat unevenly, heavy with worry. The last time he had seen his sister Tammy, she was being wheeled through those very doors, pale, silent, and terrified. He could still hear her voice from the night before. "Chris," she'd whispered, clutching his hand, her eyes glossy with fear. "If something happens, just make sure Mama knows I tried, okay?" He'd shaken his head fiercely. "Don't talk like that, Tammy. You fought too hard to get here. You're gonna come out of that room smiling, you hear me?" Now, sitting alone, those words felt thin, empty. He had seen too much, lost too much, and loved too deeply to pretend that everything was guaranteed. The weight loss surgery had saved Tammy's life once before, but this was different. Skin removal surgery wasn't about survival. It was about reclaiming what life had taken. Yet it came with its own risks. Tammy had lost over 500 pounds, but her body had been through a war, and this final step, it scared everyone. The hospital doors slid open. A nurse stepped out to smoke, and Chris caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass, eyes tired, beard unkempt, shoulders tense. "Come on, sis," he muttered. "You've made it through worse." Inside, the hallway smelled of antiseptic and metal. Every step echoed against the tile. Every beep of a heart monitor cut through the silence. He had promised himself he wouldn't cry today. He had to be strong. For Tammy, for Amy, for everyone who looked to him when things fell apart. The waiting room was nearly empty. Just a couple of older women whispering, a janitor mopping near the vending machine, and a small TV in the corner playing an old episode of 1000 LB Sisters. Chris looked up at it for a second, a soft grin flickering across his face. It was Tammy, laughing, snorting, her cheeks round, her voice teasing him about something stupid. That was the Tammy he loved. The loud, stubborn, fiery woman who refused to let anyone tell her who she could be. Now, she was in surgery fighting for the body she'd earned. He leaned back, folding his arms, his mind drifting to the past. It wasn't so long ago that Tammy could barely move. He remembered the nights of watching her struggle for breath, of rushing to her side when she'd stopped responding, of crying in the parking lot when doctors told him they didn't know if she'd make it. That memory never really left him. When she went to rehab, Chris had been the one to push her. "You don't get to give up," he'd said through tears. "You don't get to let this win." And she hadn't. She'd fought. Hard. When Tammy started losing weight, something changed, not just in her body, but in her spirit. There was light behind her eyes again. There was laughter that didn't end in wheezing. There was a woman who believed she could live again. But with each milestone came new battles, temptations, bad habits, loneliness. Chris had watched it all unfold, half as a brother, half as a father figure. And when she started vaping again, he'd nearly lost his patience. "Tammy," he'd scolded one night, sitting at her kitchen table. "You're playing with fire. You know they won't do surgery if you don't stop." "I know," she'd snapped back. "You think I like this? You think I don't want to breathe better? It helps me calm down, Chris. Everything gets loud in my head." He'd sighed, rubbing his temples. "Then we'll find something else. You just gotta stop killing yourself every time you get stressed." But she did stop. She fought the addiction like she'd fought her weight. Slowly, painfully, but she did it. Now, here she was. On the operating table, taking the last step of her transformation, a door opened. Chris turned. A nurse peeked out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Combs?" she called softly. He stood instantly. "That's me. Is she okay?" The nurse smiled faintly. "She's in recovery now. The surgery went well. There was some bleeding, but the doctors handled it." "She's stable." Chris let out a shaky breath. His shoulders dropped, the weight of worry falling from him all at once. He almost laughed, half sob, half sigh. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, wiping his eyes. "Thank you so much. She's still very weak, but she's asking for you," the nurse added gently. He nodded and followed her down the corridor. Each step felt surreal. When he entered Tammy's room, the beeping of the heart monitor filled the air. She looked small under the blankets, bandages wrapped around her midsection, her skin pale against the white sheets. But her eyes were open. "Hey, sis," he whispered, walking up to her bedside. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Hey, Bubba." He pulled up a chair, sitting close enough to hold her hand. It was cold, but it was alive. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice cracking. Tammy let out a raspy laugh. "Yeah, I scared myself too. You did it, though." "You made it through." Her eyes glistened. "Barely." "Nah," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "You're tougher than you think." "Always have been." They sat in silence for a while, just breathing the same air, just existing. The monitor beeped steadily like a metronome for life itself. Then Tammy whispered, "It hurts, Chris. Everything hurts." "I know," he said quietly. "But pain means you're still here." She nodded slowly, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. "I don't want to go back to how I was. Promise me, if I ever start slippin', you'll remind me what I went through today." Chris swallowed hard. "You don't even gotta ask. I'll drag you to the gym myself if I have to." That earned a faint chuckle from her. "You'd do it too." "Damn right." As the hours passed, nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting tubes. Chris stayed. He wasn't leaving. Not until he saw her eat, not until she laughed again. He'd seen too many moments like this turn dark. Too many times where a good day turned into a tragedy. When Amy arrived later that afternoon, she burst into tears the second she saw Tammy. "Oh my God, sis, you did it," she cried, clutching her hand. Tammy tried to smile. "Told you I would." Amy kissed her forehead. "You look beautiful, girl." Even with all that gauze and stuff, Tammy rolled her eyes. "You liar," Chris laughed softly. "Don't you start crying again, Amy. She's gonna think something's wrong." But Amy couldn't stop. I can't believe we're here. After everything. After all those years of hospital beds and ambulances. You're here. You made it." For a long while, the three of them just sat together. Brothers, sisters, survivors. The cameras were gone. The noise was gone. There was just family. Later, when Chris stepped outside for air, the sky was turning gold. He took out his phone and filmed a short clip for the upcoming 1000 LB Sisters episode. "At first look," he said into the camera. His voice steady but emotional. "It's kind of rough looking, you know. You see the blood, the swelling, all that. But you know what? She's alive. That's all that matters to me. Everything else we can work through later. The bee's alive, y'all." She made it through. He smiled then, that proud brother smile that fans had come to love. "That's my sis." Tough as nails. He paused for a moment, looking back toward the hospital window where he could see Tammy's shadow. "Y'all ain't seen nothing yet," he added quietly. "She's just getting started." The camera clicked off, but the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because for Tammy Slaton, surviving surgery wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something bigger. Something raw, real, and still fragile. As Chris drove home that night, headlights cutting through the darkness, he thought about everything they'd endured. Amy's heartbreaks, Tammy's near-death scares, his own exhaustion from being the family's anchor. It was like carrying an invisible load no one else could see, but he'd carry it always. Because they were family, because they were Slatons, because they didn't quit. The night after Tammy's surgery, the hospital corridors were quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed faintly against the walls, mixing with the rhythmic beeping of distant monitors. Chris sat slouched in a hard plastic chair outside Tammy's room, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling in his hands. He hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Inside, Tammy lay asleep, tubes running from her arms, her body wrapped in bandages like a symbol of both pain and survival. For the first time in years, Chris allowed himself to just breathe. The fear had passed, but in its place came reflection, a wave of memories that hit him one after another. He remembered the first day she told him she was approved for the skin removal surgery. The camera crew had been there, lights blinding, microphones hovering. Tammy had been nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she smiled. "I can't believe they said yes," she'd whispered. "After everything, they said yes." Chris had smiled back, that proud older brother grin. "You earned it, sis. You did the work. You lost the weight. This is your time now." But even then, there had been worry in his eyes. He'd seen too many hospital visits turn into nightmares. And deep down, he knew Tammy's body had been through so much that every surgery was a gamble. Now seeing her there, barely stirring, he whispered to himself, "You did it, girl. You really did it. He got up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark parking lot below. The glow of the streetlights shimmered on wet asphalt, and for a second, he thought about how much of their lives had been spent under hospital lights. Not party lights, not stage lights. Not the soft glow of family dinners, but the cold, sterile brightness of medical halls. When he turned back, Tammy's eyes fluttered open. "Chris," she whispered weakly. He rushed to her side. Hey, I'm here," her lips trembled. Did I make it?" He nodded, smiling softly. "You made it, sis. You're still here." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I thought I was gonna die." He squeezed her hand. "You almost scared the hell out of me. But no, you're tougher than death itself, you hear me?" She tried to laugh, but it came out as a pained exhale. "It hurts so bad." "I know," he said quietly. "But that pain? That's healing, Tammy. That's your body letting go of the old you." Her gaze wandered to the ceiling. "I don't even know who that was anymore," she whispered. "That girl who couldn't get out of bed, who needed oxygen just to talk. I feel like I've been two different people." Chris leaned back in his chair, eyes tired but tender. "You are two people. The one that almost gave up, and the one who didn't." There was a long silence. Only the steady rhythm of the monitor filled the space. Then Tammy whispered something barely audible. "I was so scared, Chris, not of dying, but of not being enough. Like, what if I lose all this weight and I still don't like myself?" Chris looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deep. He'd never heard her sound so raw. "Tammy," he said softly, "you don't need to be perfect. You just gotta be alive long enough to figure yourself out. You did the hardest part. Now it's time to learn to live again." Her lips trembled. "I don't know if I remember how." "You will," he promised. "And when you forget, I'll remind you." A small smile tugged at her lips before her eyes fluttered shut again. Chris sat there for a long time after, his mind drifting to their childhood. Back when life was simple, when they'd run through fields barefoot, eating popsicles on the porch. Tammy had always been the loud one, the bold one. Amy was the sensitive soul, and he was the protector. But somewhere along the way, the laughter turned into arguments, the playfulness into pain. The weight had built not just on their bodies, but on their hearts. And though the cameras showed their lives to millions, no one truly understood the guilt that came with loving someone you couldn't save. Chris had seen the comments online. The jokes, the insults. People calling Tammy lazy, mean, selfish. They didn't see the woman crying at 2 a.m., whispering apologies to herself. They didn't see the fear behind every angry outburst, or the loneliness behind every eye roll. That's what made this moment so powerful. Because against all odds, Tammy had survived. Later that week, as the swelling started to go down, the production team filmed Chris outside the hospital for his confessional. The wind blew lightly against his face as he adjusted his cap and looked straight into the camera. "At first look," he said slowly, "it's rough. You see all the dried blood, the drains, the bruises. It's hard to see your sister like that. But you know what? She's alive. That's all that matters. Everything else we can work on later." He paused, swallowing hard. "I ain't gonna lie. I was scared. Thought I might lose her again. But when I heard she made it through, man, that was like the world gave me my sister back." He looked down for a moment, trying to compose himself. People think Tammy's just loud and rude and stubborn. And yeah, she is, but she's also one of the strongest damn people I've ever met. She's been through hell and she still gets up every time. That's my family. That's who we are. He exhaled slowly, the emotion raw in his voice. "I don't know what comes next. But for the first time in a long time, I believe she's got a real chance at a new life." The camera lingered on his face. Tired eyes, trembling jaw, quiet hope. When the crew packed up, Chris walked back inside, a small bouquet of daisies in his hand. Tammy was sitting up this time, groggy but smiling faintly. "Who those for?" she asked. He grinned. "You hospital rooms are too boring. You need a little color," she rolled her eyes. "You know I hate flowers." "Yeah," he chuckled, setting them on the table anyway. "That's why I brought 'em." She stared at them for a long moment. "They're actually kind of nice," he smiled. "Told you." Amy came in shortly after, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, y'all," she said, her voice still raspy from crying the night before. Tammy smirked. "You look worse than me," Amy laughed. Girl, I was up all night watching your old clips on YouTube. I can't believe how far you've come. Tammy's smile faded a little. Sometimes I still see her when I look in the mirror. That old me. The one everyone made fun of. Chris stepped closer. That's okay. You don't gotta erase her. You just gotta forgive her. Tammy looked at him, eyes glassy. You really think I can? He nodded slowly. I know you can. For the first time, Tammy smiled. A real, genuine smile. Then maybe I will. When Tammy was finally cleared to go home, the air outside the hospital felt like freedom. The sky was bright, the breeze gentle. Amy helped her into the van while Chris carried her bag. You ready to go home? He asked. Tammy looked out the window, the sunlight warming her face. Yeah, she said softly. For once. I really am. On the ride back, they didn't talk much. The hum of the tires on the road was enough. Every so often, Chris would glance at her through the rearview mirror just to make sure she was still okay. And every time she was there, quiet, alive, healing. When they pulled up to her house, a few neighbors waved. Word had spread fast. Tammy was home. Chris helped her inside, setting her gently on the couch. You take it easy, you hear? He said sternly. She laughed. Yes, Dad, Amy smirked. You know he's going to call you every 2 hours, right? Already does, Tammy muttered. Chris chuckled. And I'll keep doing it too. Ain't no shame in checking on the people you love. Tammy leaned back, closing her eyes. I'm just glad to be home, Amy nodded. We're proud of you, sis. For a brief moment, everything felt right. The noise of the past, the drama, the chaos. It all faded. Chris stood in the doorway, watching his sisters laugh softly together. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Sometimes silence was enough, because deep down he knew this wasn't just about surgery. It was about survival, redemption, and family. It was about learning to live again after believing you couldn't. That night, when Chris got home, he sat outside under the porch light, scrolling through old photos on his phone. There was one of Tammy before rehab. Oxygen tubes, swollen cheeks, tired eyes. Then the most recent one, post-surgery. Thinner, paler, but smiling. He stared at the two pictures side by side. Damn, sis, he whispered. You really did it. He posted the photo online with a short caption. It's been a long road. Still got a ways to go. But proud don't even begin to cover it. Love you, sis. Within hours, the comments flooded in. Proud of Tammy. Chris, you're the best brother ever. This made me cry. He didn't need the validation, but it felt good. Not for fame, but for the reminder that people saw what he saw. Progress, love, growth. Back in her room, Tammy stared at the ceiling, bandages tight, heart full. She whispered softly to herself, I made it. For once, she believed it. The days after Tammy returned home were quiet but heavy with emotion. Every step she took, every mirror she passed, reminded her that her body was now foreign territory. The stitches, the scars, the way her skin felt tighter and different. All of it was proof of a transformation that went far beyond the physical. Chris visited every day, usually in the late afternoon when the sun dipped low enough to fill the living room with soft gold light. He'd sit on the couch beside her, talking about nothing and everything. What Amy had cooked, what the neighbors were gossiping about, the latest chaos in the family group chat. But underneath it all, there was always that unspoken worry in his eyes. How you feeling today? He asked one evening, his voice careful but warm. Tammy hesitated. It's weird, she admitted. I thought I'd feel better, like, free, but I still feel heavy. Just in a different way. Chris leaned back, nodding. Makes sense. You carried that weight a long time. Not just on your body, but in your head, too. You can't just cut that part off with surgery. Tammy stared down at her hands, tracing the faint indentations left by the IVs. I thought once I got here, I'd finally like myself. But I look in the mirror and I still see her, that girl who everyone laughed at. The one who messed up over and over again. Chris's jaw tightened slightly. You ain't that girl anymore, Tam. She laughed softly, bitterly. Then why do I still feel like her? He turned to her, his voice lower now. 'Cause healing don't happen in a hospital bed. It happens right here. He tapped his chest. This part takes the longest. Tammy's eyes filled with tears. I just don't know if I can do it. He reached over, squeezing her hand. You can. You already did the hardest damn thing. You didn't give up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the sound of cicadas filled the air, that endless summer buzz that somehow made the world feel still. Then Chris said quietly, "You remember when we were kids and you used to jump on the trampoline and try to do flips?" Tammy looked up, confused, then laughed softly. "Yeah, I always landed on my face," he grinned. "You'd get up mad as hell, throw a shoe at me, then go right back up there. That's what I see when I look at you now. That same stubborn girl who just won't quit." Her laughter turned into tears. "I don't feel like that girl anymore, Chris." "That's okay," he said softly. "You'll find her again." "Okay," he said softly. "You'll find her again." Later that night, when Chris left, Tammy sat in the quiet. The house was dark except for the TV's soft flicker. She flipped through old episodes of 1000 Elb Sisters, watching herself from years ago. The oxygen tube, the scooter, the angry rants that went viral online. She watched as the screen Tammy snapped at doctors, cursed at her siblings, pushed people away. And then she watched Chris, the look on his face every time she lashed out. That mix of pain, frustration, and love that only a brother could feel. Tears blurred her vision. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the screen. The next morning, she called Chris. "Can you come over?" He could tell something was wrong by the tone in her voice. When he arrived, she was sitting outside on the porch, wrapped in a blanket even though the sun was warm. Her eyes were red, but there was a strange calmness about her. "I watched the old episodes last night," she said as soon as he sat down. "Oh yeah?" he said carefully. "I was awful," she whispered. "Like really awful. I didn't see it before, but now I do. I was mean. I hurt people." "I hurt you," Chris sighed. "Tammy, no, let me say this," she interrupted. "You didn't deserve that. None of y'all did. I thought I was fighting everyone, but I was really just fighting myself." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You done fighting yourself now?" She let out a shaky breath. "I think so," he smiled faintly. "Good, 'cause we've been waiting on you." They sat there for a while, watching cars pass by, not needing to say much else. The air smelled like freshly cut grass. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, kids laughed. For once, life felt simple again. A few weeks later, Tammy was strong enough to start walking around the neighborhood. Chris went with her on her first attempt, staying just behind her with his arms crossed like a proud coach. "You got this," he said. "I feel like a newborn deer," she grumbled. Wobbling slightly. "Better than being a couch potato," he teased. "Shut up," she said. But there was a grin on her face. They made it halfway down the block before she had to stop. She leaned against a mailbox, catching her breath. "I can't believe how hard this is," she said between breaths. Chris handed her a water bottle. "That's how you know it's working." Tammy nodded, her face flushed but glowing. "I can't believe I'm out here walking." "Like, actually walking?" he smiled. "Yeah, look at you, Tam. Out here doing the thing people said you'd never do." She laughed softly. "Feels weird. Like I'm learning to live all over again." "Maybe that's the point," he said quietly. They walked back slowly, the sun setting behind them, turning the sky orange and pink. When they reached her driveway, Tammy stopped and turned to him. "You know, I couldn't have done any of this without you." Chris shrugged. "Sure you could have," she shook her head. "No, you were there when everyone else gave up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." He looked down for a moment, his voice low. "That's what family's for. We don't give up. Not even when it's hard." Tammy's eyes softened. "You really mean that?" "Always have," he said. As the days turned into weeks, Tammy's body began to heal faster. The swelling went down, the bruises faded, and the stitches finally came out. For the first time, she looked in the mirror and didn't immediately turn away. It wasn't about beauty, it was about survival. About seeing herself and recognizing that she was still standing. Chris noticed the change too. She smiled more, laughed more. She started cooking her own meals, trying new recipes, even joking about doing a fitness video for the show. But there were still bad days. One afternoon, he found her crying in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with her back against the counter. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. "I just looked at myself," she sobbed. "All these scars. I feel ugly," he knelt beside her. "Those ain't ugly, Tam. Those are proof you survived." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Do you really believe that?" "Hell yeah," he said. "You think anyone else could have gone through what you did and still be here? You earned every one of those scars." Her tears slowed, her breathing steadied. She wiped her face and nodded. "Maybe you're right." "I usually am," he said, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled weakly. "Don't push it." By the time the cameras returned for another round of filming, Tammy was stronger, not just physically, but mentally. Chris stood beside her in the confessional room, both of them sitting in front of the bright lights. The producer asked, "How's Tammy doing now?" Chris looked over at his sister, then back to the camera. "She's healing. And she's fighting. That's all you can ask for. This ain't the end of her story." "It's just the start of a new chapter," Tammy smiled softly. "I used to think I'd never make it here. But I did. And now I want people to know that it's never too late. No matter how bad it gets, you can come back." The producer nodded. "That's beautiful. Anything else you'd like to say to your fans?" Tammy took a deep breath. "Thank you. For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." Chris looked at her proudly. "She means that." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from shared pain and survival. When the cameras turned off, Tammy looked at him and said, "You think people will believe I've changed?" He smiled. "Doesn't matter if they do. You know, you have." "That's enough." That night, as Chris drove home, he thought about everything they'd been through. The screaming matches, the tears, the hospital visits, the fear. And now this piece, he never thought he'd see it. But seeing Tammy finally start to love herself, even just a little, was worth every moment of the struggle. He turned on the radio, some old country song playing softly, and whispered to himself, "She's gonna be okay." Inside her house, Tammy stood in front of the mirror again. This time she didn't flinch. She touched the faint lines where her scars had healed and smiled faintly. "I'm still here," she whispered. And for once, she believed it. The weeks rolled on, and Tammy's progress became impossible to ignore. Her steps were steadier, her face brighter, her laughter more frequent. For once, the Slaton household wasn't filled with tension or shouting. Even Chris noticed the shift. He came over one afternoon carrying a box of groceries. "I brought you some stuff. Got that Greek yogurt you like, even though I don't know why anyone eats that sour mess," he joked. Tammy chuckled as she took the bags. "You mean to tell me you didn't eat half of it on the way over?" "I might have had one," he said with a grin. "Had to make sure it wasn't poisoned." Their banter felt easy again, like siblings who had finally remembered what it felt like to love without fear. But the outside world, as always, had its own opinions. When Tammy posted her first photo since the surgery, a simple mirror selfie with no filters, just her standing tall in a loose t-shirt and jeans, the internet exploded. Some comments were beautiful. "Proud of you, girl. You look so happy, keep it up." "Tammy, you're glowing!" But others were cruel. "She still looks big. Why is she showing off?" "It won't last." Chris saw them before she did. He was scrolling on his phone when he froze, his jaw tightening. "Hey, Tam," he said, his voice careful. "Don't read the comments today." She looked up from the couch. "Why?" he hesitated. "People just being people. You know how they are." Tammy sighed and reached for her phone anyway. Within seconds, he could tell she was reading them. Her smile faded, replaced by that old look, the one that had haunted her for years, the mix of shame and anger. She set the phone down. "They'll never see me as anything but the fat girl who messed up." Chris shook his head. "Nah, that's just noise. You can't listen to folks who ain't lived your life." She looked at him, her voice small. "But it hurts." "I know it does," he said softly. "But think about all the people who love you. Me, Amy, the fans who've been rooting for you since day one. You gotta focus on them, not the ones trying to tear you down." She nodded slowly, but her eyes still shimmered with tears. "It's just, every time I think I'm past it, something pulls me back." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's life, Tam. It don't get easier. You just get stronger." The next day, Chris decided enough was enough. He went on his own social media page and recorded a short video. "I don't usually say much about this kind of stuff," he began, looking directly into the camera. "But y'all gotta stop tearing my sister down. She's been through hell and back, and she's worked harder than anyone knows. If you can't say nothing kind, just don't say nothing at all. Period." The clip went viral almost instantly. Fans flooded the comments with support. "Thank you, Chris. Tammy's lucky to have a brother like you. We love you both." When Tammy saw it, she cried. Not out of sadness this time, but something deeper. Gratitude. You didn't have to do that, she told him when he came over that night. He shrugged. Yeah, I did. Why? 'Cause you needed someone to remind you you're not alone, he said simply. Tammy's voice trembled. You always show up, don't you? Damn right, he said. That's my job. A few weeks later, the show's producers reached out to schedule a new round of filming. This time, they wanted to focus on Tammy's recovery and the family's emotional journey. Chris wasn't sure at first. The show had brought them fame, but it had also brought chaos. You sure you want to do this again? He asked her. Tammy hesitated. I think I do. Not for the fame, I just want people to see that I made it through. Then we'll do it, he said. Filming started the following week. The cameras rolled as Chris helped Tammy walk through the park, both of them laughing when a gust of wind nearly blew his hat off. At one point, the producer asked Chris, "What's it like seeing your sister after everything she's been through?" He paused for a long moment before answering. You know, I used to think tough love was the only way to reach her. Yelling, pushing, trying to make her listen. But I realize now, what she needed wasn't tough love. She just needed love. Period. Tammy looked at him then, tears in her eyes. He smiled gently. And she's got it. The episode aired months later and quickly became one of the most talked about in the show's history. Fans were stunned by Tammy's transformation. Not just the physical one, but the emotional shift. Clips of Chris comforting her during recovery went viral. Memes popped up with quotes like, "Healing don't happen in a hospital bed, it happens right here," with a heart emoji. For once, the internet was kind. Tammy found herself scrolling through the comments again, but this time smiling. I'm crying, this family has come so far. Chris is the brother everyone wishes they had. Tammy looks beautiful inside and out. She sent one of the comments to Chris with a heart emoji. He replied with just 2 words, told ya. But even with the love pouring in, Tammy still faced inner battles. Some nights she'd lie awake replaying her past. The mistakes, the arguments, the hospital stays. She wondered if she'd ever be fully free of that old version of herself. One of those nights she called Chris. You awake? She asked softly. Yeah, what's wrong? I keep thinking about everything. The way I used to be. How mean I was. How you always tried to help, and I never listened. Chris was quiet for a moment. You ain't gotta keep punishing yourself, Tam. You already learned from it. I know, she said, her voice breaking. But sometimes I still feel like I don't deserve all this. The love, the second chances. He sighed. Listen to me. You earned it. Every bit of it. Don't let the old you keep taken from the new you, she sniffled. You always know what to say. That's 'cause I've been where you are, he said softly. Maybe not with the same battles, but I know what it's like to hate yourself. Took me years to forgive myself for not doing more sooner. You did everything, she whispered. Maybe. But now we're both learning how to do better. That's what matters. There was a long pause, the kind filled with understanding. Then Tammy said quietly, Thank you for never giving up on me. He chuckled. You're stuck with me, sis. Might as well get used to it. A few days later, Tammy did something she hadn't done in years. She left her phone on the table and went outside by herself. No cameras, no fans, no social media. Just her and the sky. She walked slowly down the same street she and Chris had walked weeks ago. The leaves had started to change color, a sign that summer was giving way to fall. She stopped by the small park where she used to sit in her wheelchair and watch other people move freely. Now she was one of them. There was an older woman sitting on a bench, reading. When she looked up, her eyes widened. Oh my goodness, she said. You're Tammy Slaton, aren't you? Tammy smiled shyly. Yeah, that's me, the woman stood. I just wanted to say thank you. Watching your story helped me lose 50 pounds. But more than that, it made me believe I could change. Tammy blinked, stunned. Really? The woman nodded. You're stronger than you think. Don't ever forget that. They hugged, briefly but warmly. And for the first time in her life, Tammy didn't feel like the story. She felt like the message. That night, she called Chris again. You'll never believe what happened, she said, her voice bright with joy. She told him about the woman in the park, about how surreal it felt to be someone's inspiration. Chris laughed softly. Told you again. You're making more of a difference than you realize, Tammy smiled. It feels good. Like maybe all that pain meant something. He nodded, though she couldn't see him. It did, every bit of it. As weeks passed, Tammy started doing small interviews. She talked about her surgery, her recovery, and her relationship with Chris. Every time she made sure to give him credit. He never gave up on me, she'd say. When I couldn't believe in myself, he did. The fans loved it. Team Slaton started trending again, but this time it wasn't about drama, it was about redemption. During one interview, a reporter asked, "Tammy, what do you think was the turning point for you?" She thought for a long time before answering. When I realized my brother wasn't my enemy, he was my mirror. Every time he got mad or frustrated, it wasn't because he hated me. It was because he saw the person I could be. And I finally saw her too. The clip went viral overnight. Even Chris, who usually hated watching himself on TV, couldn't help but smile. "That's my girl," he said proudly. As the season wrapped up, the producers filmed one final scene. Tammy and Chris sitting together outside, just like they did in the beginning. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. "All the time," he said. "And I still can't believe it." "Me neither." He looked over at her. "You happy?" She thought for a moment. "Yeah, for the first time in my life, I think I am." He grinned. "Good, 'cause you deserve it." She smiled, looking up at the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. "We both do." The air had that crisp edge of autumn, the kind that smelled like leaves and change. Tammy stood by her front door holding a small piece of paper. It was an invitation. Across the top, in neat lettering, it read, "Community Wellness Panel, featuring Tammy and Chris Slaton." For a moment, she just stared at it, stunned. When the producer first mentioned speaking publicly, she laughed. "Who's going to want to hear me talk?" she had said. But now here it was. Proof that people didn't just want to hear her story. They wanted to learn from it. She picked up the phone and called Chris. "Guess who's officially a motivational speaker?" He laughed so loud she had to pull the phone away from her ear. "No way, you serious?" "Dead serious. They're calling it From Broken to Brave, the Slaton Journey." He chuckled again. "You better not make me cry in front of strangers." "Oh, you're crying," she teased. "You ain't getting out of that." The day of the event came faster than either of them expected. The venue wasn't huge, just a local hall filled with folding chairs, cameras, and about 100 faces that looked up with genuine admiration. As they walked in, Tammy squeezed Chris's hand. "I'm nervous," he smiled. "That's good. Means it matters." The lights dimmed, the host made introductions, and suddenly they were seated on stage together under a soft spotlight. Tammy looked out at the crowd. People of every shape and age, many holding tissues or phones ready to record. For once, she didn't feel like a TV character. She felt like a human being standing in front of other human beings, raw and real. When the host asked, "Tammy, what has this journey taught you?" she paused. She didn't want to sound rehearsed. She wanted to speak from that place deep in her chest where the truth lived. "It taught me that healing doesn't start when you lose weight," she said slowly. "It starts when you stop hiding from yourself. For years, I blamed everybody. My family, the cameras, the world. But really, I was scared. Scared to live, scared to fail, scared to feel." She glanced at Chris beside her, who nodded silently. "And this man," she continued, "he never stopped believing I could change, even when I didn't. That kind of love, it's what saved me." The room was silent except for the sound of quiet sniffles. Chris cleared his throat, his usual humor softening into something vulnerable. "You know," he said, "a lot of folks think being strong means never breaking. But I've learned it's the opposite. Real strength is when you break 100 times and keep getting back up." Tammy reached over and took his hand. The crowd erupted into applause, some standing, others crying. Cameras flashed, but for once, neither of them cared. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about redemption, and the kind that doesn't come with a TV contract, but from within. After the panel ended, people lined up to meet them. A young woman in her 20s stepped forward first. "You saved my life," she said, voice trembling. "I was ready to give up until I saw your story. You made me believe I could try again." Tammy hugged her, tears filling her eyes. "Then don't stop," she whispered. "You can do this." An older man came next, shaking Chris's hand. "You're a hell of a brother," he said. "Wish I'd had someone like you when I was going through it." Chris smiled modestly. Hey, I'm just doing what brothers do. By the time the hall emptied, the siblings were exhausted, but in that good, soul-deep way that comes from knowing your pain actually mattered. They stepped outside into the cool night. The moon hung low and golden, washing the parking lot in soft light. Tammy looked up at it and said, almost to herself, "Remember when I used to sit in my wheelchair and wish I could walk again?" Chris smiled. "Yeah, now you're running circles around me." She laughed, then turned serious. "You ever think about how different things could have gone? Like, what if I didn't make it?" He took a deep breath. "I think about it every day." And he looked at her, eyes glistening. "And I thank God you did." She reached out and hugged him tight. "You too." In the months that followed, life didn't magically become perfect, but it became real. Tammy started volunteering at a local recovery group, helping others navigate food addiction and self-image struggles. She never preached. She just listened, told stories, laughed, and cried with them. People often said, "You should write a book." "Maybe one day," she'd answer. "But for now, I'm just living the chapters." Chris, meanwhile, found his own peace. He began working part-time as a fitness mentor for bariatric patients, not because he was perfect, but because he understood the fight. When asked how he stayed motivated, he'd grin and say, "My sister keeps me honest." Together, they attended therapy, family dinners, birthdays, and quiet nights watching movies. All the little things they once thought they'd lost. Then one evening, as the camera crew packed up after filming a short follow-up for the next season, Chris sat on the porch steps. Looking out at the fading sunset, Tammy came out carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed him one. "What you thinking about?" she asked. He shrugged. "Just everything. How far we've come. How many times I thought I'd lose you. How many times you proved me wrong," she smiled. "I didn't just do it for me, you know." "I know," he said. "But I'm glad you did it at all." They sat quietly for a while, the hum of cicadas filling the air. After a few minutes, Tammy said softly, "I used to think I'd never be more than my pain. But now I get it. Pain doesn't define you. What you do with it does." Chris nodded slowly. "That's deep, Tam," she grinned. "Yeah, I've been hanging out with Oprah." He burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the quiet neighborhood. "God help us all if you start your own talk show." "Hey," she teased, "don't tempt me." The next morning, Chris woke up to find his phone flooded with notifications. The network had just dropped the trailer for the new season of 1000 LB Sisters. The final scene in the trailer showed Tammy walking alone through a field, her silhouette strong against the sunrise. Then a voiceover from Chris played. "She ain't just my sister. She's proof that people can change." That hope ain't just for movies. It's for real life. Real life. The internet went wild. Fans wrote messages like, "This made me cry," and "Best comeback story ever." For the first time since the show began, the focus wasn't on the drama, it was on healing. Weeks later, Tammy and Chris sat together watching the premiere. When that final scene came on, Tammy reached for his hand. "You said that?" He smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, didn't think they'd actually use it." She squeezed his hand. "I'm glad they did." As the credits rolled, Chris turned to her. "You ready for whatever's next?" Tammy grinned. "For the first time in my life, yeah." The years that followed were quieter but beautiful in their own way. Tammy maintained her health, continued mentoring others, and even started a small podcast with Chris called Family Weight. It wasn't polished or fancy, just 2 siblings talking about real life, laughing, crying, and reminding listeners that change doesn't have a timeline. Their tagline? "It's never too late to love yourself, or someone else." The show gained a loyal audience. Emails poured in from people all over the world. One from a woman in Brazil read, "You helped me forgive my brother after years of silence. Thank you." Another from a man in Ireland said, "Watching your story made me get off the couch and start walking again." Every time they read one, Tammy's eyes would fill with tears. "We're really helping people," she'd whisper. Chris would smile and say, "One step at a time, just like we did." One evening, as the sun dipped low and the world seemed unusually peaceful, Tammy stood by the window, watching her reflection fade into the glass. Behind her, Chris was humming along to an old country song on the radio. She turned to him. "Hey, Chris. Yeah? Do you ever miss the old days?" He looked up, thinking, Parts of them, maybe, but not the pain. You? She smiled softly. I think I miss the simplicity. Before the cameras, before the fame. But not who I was. I like who I am now, he nodded. Me too, Tam, me too. She looked back out the window. The stars were beginning to show, tiny glimmers in a dark sky. You ever wonder, she said, if we were meant to go through all that? Like maybe it had to happen for us to find this peace? Chris leaned back, folding his arms. Yeah, sometimes I think life breaks you on purpose, just to show you how strong you really are. She smiled. Then I guess we're proof. Damn right, he said with a grin. As night settled, Tammy sat outside with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The air was cool, the kind that hinted at winter. She looked up at the stars again and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, maybe to life itself, because somehow through all the pain, shame, and chaos, she had found her way back. And waiting for her, like always, was her brother. Chris stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. Still stargazing? Yeah, she said softly. Just thinking. About what? She smiled, eyes glinting. How far we've come, and how far we still can go. He handed her the mug and sat beside her. Then here's to the next chapter. They clinked their mugs together, and for once, maybe for the first time in their whole story, there was no yelling, no fear, no struggle. Just 2 siblings under a quiet sky, finally at peace with who they'd become. The camera faded out on that moment. No music, no narration. Just silence and the sound of their laughter blending with the night air. Because in the end, that was the real story all along. Not weight loss, not fame, but love. The kind that doesn't give up, even when the world does. The world does.